They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And usually we celebrate happy women, but today we are celebrating happy men. That's one of our rules of our podcast is it's not just for women. And we love to feature people who are doing incredible things, brave things, especially in the sphere of pop culture and in Hollywood. And one of those people is an incredible actor. He has had a huge career spanning, well, a couple of decades at least. His name is Nick Searcy. He is here to talk about a new movie that is out, The War on Truth, which you've probably heard about January 6th and revealing some of the lies behind that. He produced and starred in that film, thewarontruthmovie.com. You can also follow him on X at Nick Searcy. And Nick, what a pleasure to welcome you into Happy Women. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for letting me be here. It's always a pleasure to be around happy women. I've been married for 38 years. It's nice.
It's good when you have a happy woman and you've been married for 38 years. That's a testament to you.
Well, you'll have to ask her about that, but good thing she's not on the show right now. So.
That's right. We don't want that. We don't want to go too far. But I will tell you, Nick, that before we jump into some of the films that you've been working on and some of the projects around January 6th and revealing some real truth, I want to talk about you for a second. How did you get to where you are today? And I would include being so brave to speak out against Hollywood when that was not the popular and easy thing to do.
Well, I don't know. I sort of wanted to be an actor my whole life, ever since I was a kid. And I did a lot of plays in New York in my 20s. I didn't really get started in films until 31. And so I really didn't start to make a living as an actor exclusively until I was about 31 or 32 years old. So I think that kind of protected me from a lot of foolish things that I might have done if I'd gotten a little bit more famous younger. By the time Fried Green Tomatoes was sort of my big break, I had done some films before that, but when that film came out, it pretty much put me on the map. And so ever since then, I've been able to make a living as an actor. And I never knew that I was supposed to keep my mouth shut until it was too late. So I just sort of had to roll with it,
So, Nick, I have to ask you, when did you first raise your flag as a conservative and out yourself?
Well, I never really hid it. Like I said, I don't think I really knew that I was supposed to hide it. And I didn't move to California until I was in my 30s. So I was never quiet, but I think during the Obama years is when it really sort of went, okay, they're really tearing the country apart. I need to speak up. And also when Andrew Breitbart passed away so suddenly, he was a friend and he was an inspiration to me. And when he passed away, I thought to myself, what am I waiting for? I don't know how long I have. I'm going to say what I think and try to let that be part of my work. And so that's really around then is when I really sort of steeled my spine and said, I don't care what they think of me.
You know what, we were talking, we've been talking the last couple of weeks, Katie and I, about film projects that have had an impact on us. Some that are lesser known, some that are known obviously very well. If you could think about some of, and I'd ask you movies that you've been in, but also movies that you've seen, just consumed, loving the art. What are some of the movies that have had the biggest impact on you?
Well, I'd have to say for films that I've been involved in, directing Gosnell was a huge, huge thing for me. I learned so much doing that, and also just it really affected me in many ways. There were many things that happened during the filming of that movie, which I go into in my book, that were really made me feel like I was divinely inspired. And so that movie made a big impression on me. Wow, that's a tough question about what movie I've actually seen that I wasn't involved in. There's I'd have to go back a few years. I think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest really made a big impression on me when I was younger. And, that kind of one of the movies that I saw that I was like, yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to be a film actor. I want to tell stories that are this good.
I have to say, the one of yours that really impacted me was Capital Punishment, the 2021 film about the way a number of the J6ers were arrested. I just, I'm deep into this, right? I'm eating and breathing this stuff every day, even if it's not my choice. I'm married to it, right? And I saw so much in your film that I had no idea about. I mean, the visual of, having a 20-member SWAT team arrive at a family's home in the suburbs. I just found that movie utterly shocking.
Well, The War on Truth, which is the movie that we released in May of this year, is basically a sequel to that, because the really frightening thing about all that is that they haven't stopped. They're still doing this. I mean, there's people in the movie that, were raided this very year. I mean, they have not slowed down a bit. They're continuing to arrest people. Matthew Graves, the district attorney in D.C., announced a few months ago that he was going to start going after people that never went in the building, that were just standing around outside. And the reason they're doing this, I'm sure you know, but it's to keep the narrative going. They have to keep this idea that everything that happened on January 6th was a bunch of crazy domestic terrorists who were trying to overthrow democracy, which is completely ridiculous. But they have to keep that narrative going until the election. Like most of the left's lies, the lies have a specific goal, and once that goal is achieved, they just drop that lie and they move on to the next lie. So we're gonna have to put up with this until the election, at least.
Well, and they need to run against Donald Trump because he's a threat to democracy. They can't run against him on policy because his policies are better than Kamala Harris. So what do they have? They have the threat against democracy. So we keep seeing this. And let's jump into it, because The War on Truth is out now. You can find it at thewarontruthmovie.com. You produced and starred in it. As you mentioned, January 6th has been a focus of yours. And that's because, Nick, as I understand, you were at the Capitol on January 6th. So for people who were not, what did you see? And why were you compelled to tell the real truth? Obviously, probably because of all these lies that are being spun. But what did you see that day?
I saw more people than I've ever seen before in one place in my life. And most of them were singing and praying for the country and singing hymns. And it was a happy time. I mean, I was there walking around, people of all walks of life, people of all races. And it was a very happy time. And I didn't even know that the violence had occurred until I got back home that night. And that was all you saw. That was all you saw on the television. They didn't show you, how the real bulk of the crowd had nothing to do with any of that. And so that's what sort of set me on the path of let's tell the truth about this. I mean, because, that was the first question that came to my mind is, why are they lying? What is the goal behind this? And so that's what the questions that we tried to answer in Capital Punishment, which was very early in the process. That was released in November of 21. And we sort of raised a lot of questions in that movie that we were able to answer in The War on Truth.
So I'd love to know, with all the research that you've done, what is your assessment of what happened that day? Was it fully instigated, or was it that things amongst a small group got out of hand? I mean, what do you think now after all the research that you've done?
I think it was fully instigated. I think they planned it months beforehand. And the one thing the biggest piece of evidence to me, and this is something that nobody ever mentions, the process that was going on in the House that day was exactly what the protesters who went to Washington that day wanted to have happen. There was no reason for the protesters to want to disrupt Ted Cruz when he was standing up and challenging the vote, because they wanted the vote to be sent back to the states for 10 days to verify it. So this idea that we were there to try to stop that process from going on and overthrow democracy is a lie. The only people that benefited from that process being stopped that day were the Democrats. And you can hear them on the radio. You can hear Pelosi saying, if we don't stop this somehow, they're going to get everything they want. And so when you use that fact and you piece together everything that happened that day, why were the police waving people in? Why were they taking the barricades down in some places and not in others? Why did the Capitol Police start firing into the middle of a peaceful crowd in order to instigate them? It's because they wanted to get people into the Capitol, declare an emergency, clear the House and Senate, stop the process. And what happened? When they brought the House and Senate back together, they said, it's too dangerous for us to continue. These crazy domestic terrorists outside are trying to overthrow democracy, and we've got to go ahead and certify the election right now. So January 6th did not benefit anybody that was there that day. The only people it benefited were the Democrats.
You know, one of the things that I've often thought about and we've talked about before is just kind of the chain of events, knowing that you're going to have this many people in that type of space. And it was early on, days before, Kash Patel and others say that President Trump went and asked if they could get National Guard protection, if they could bring in some extra security around the Capitol. They talked to the mayor of D.C. That was denied. They talked to Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives. That was denied. What was Pelosi's role in all of this? Because even her daughter has some pretty compelling footage about Nancy Pelosi trying to take responsibility for what happened on January 6th. How do you see she played into everything?
Well, she's part of the setup. And like we talked to one of the attorneys that we speak to in the movie talks about her role in saying that, you know, she's trying to act like she was innocent, but she's a bad actress. And you can tell, I mean, she's the one. They didn't want the National Guard there because if the National Guard had been there, none of it would have ever happened. Nobody
Right.
would have gone into the Capitol. None of this would have ever happened. And that's why they didn't want the National Guard there. And in fact, Tariq Johnson, who's a Capitol Police officer who actually was a hero that day, he cleared the House and Senate, but he tells us in our movie that he was trying to get his higher ups to approve him clearing the House and Senate because he knew what would happen if the protesters blundered into a House and Senate floor when it was an ongoing process. There would have been a bloodbath. I mean, the Capitol Police would have legally been able to completely open up. And I'm convinced to this day that that's what they really wanted. They were disappointed that there weren't more people dead because they wanted a bloodbath that they could then pin on Trump and say, see, these people are horrible domestic terrorists. We had to kill some of them, and we've got to get rid of these people. We have to keep them from ever having power again.
How far have you gotten in being able to identify some of the instigators in those events?
Well, there is facial recognition software. It's starting to come out now. The FBI, they had a hearing the other day where one of the guys said, we are going to release a list of the confidential human sources that were in the crowd that day. And Thomas Massey was going, well, can you give me a number? Is it 100? Is it less than 100? Is it more than 100? Oh, we can't talk about that because it's an ongoing investigation or whatever. But what's happening is that they are beginning now to admit everything that we said in our movie, that these were confidential human resources, that the FBI had assets there that were instigating and part of the process, part of what happened that day. And now that it's close enough to the election, they're going to admit it. Eventually they're going to have to come clean with all this.
How are they going to do that, though? I mean, think about that. I know that you're right because we've seen this. I mean, just name the issue and the administration, this one, Biden and Harris, have lied to us about things, and then they quietly change their story. They quietly change their numbers, and the mainstream media is not honest. They don't hold people accountable. We know all that. But when they have said that this was a group of right-wing extremists trying to get into the Capitol to stop the election, the peaceful of transfer of power, how are they going to be able to come out there and say the FBI was out there actually agitating and getting people to go in? I mean, that to me is stunning. That is the biggest lie in our nation's history.
It really is. And the way they'll do it is the way they always do it. The media will just not stop asking questions about that. They just won't mention it again. And that's what I mean about their lies have a specific goal in time. As soon as that lie is no longer useful, they just don't mention it anymore. They'll just never bring it up again. And they never pay any consequences for their actions. And this is because of, we have weak-kneed Republicans in a lot of places, and they don't hold these people responsible. And that's because in many cases, I think they're compromised. I don't know exactly why, they're so afraid of the left, but they are. And so that's why the left continues to march the ball down the field, because they never pay any consequence for their crimes.
I think that's so true. It's really frustrating, but I think we see the same thing with regard to the 2020 election. Christina Bobb, who was with One American News at the time, wrote a great book about this, where she really dug in and was able to pinpoint in so many ways that the Democrats engineered and manipulated the election results. But her final conclusion was that Republicans are every bit as guilty because they didn't do anything to stop it. And it's just, it's so frustrating. But I don't know, part of me is encouraged right now, because I think that we do have some real fighters. I agree with you. They remain very much in the minority, but they're there. We've got some in Congress. We've got some in the Senate. I think we've got more running for office now. So looking at the sort of broader landscape, and of course you have to figure President Trump into that landscape as well, yeah. But aren't you somewhat encouraged by what you see as the pushback that there might yet be a chance for justice? Volatility and uncertainty are everywhere we turn. Many Americans have grown increasingly tired of the reckless fiscal spending, mounting national debt, and the looming threat to the dollar. With never-ending political and global conflicts, Americans are looking for a way out of the fragile paper system and craving a trustworthy asset to help protect their savings. That's why they turn to gold. Specifically, a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. If you have over $100,000 in a retirement account, it's time you learned about the potential benefits of a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. Augusta Precious Metals is a world-class organization that prides itself on top-notch service. Ready to learn more? Get your free guide on gold IRAs today by calling 855-222-6994. Volatility is everywhere. Now is the time to take control of your retirement to secure a brighter financial future with Augusta Precious Metals. Call them at 855-222-6994 today.
Yes. I mean, I'm encouraged more by the people of the country than I am by the politicians. I think more and more people are beginning to wake up, and they're beginning to understand exactly what's going on. The only qualm I have is it too late? Has the left, completely cemented their control on power, their control on the electoral process, so that it doesn't matter what the people want? Because that's what ultimately communism is never instituted by a majority of the people. They don't vote for it. It's always 10% of the country that takes enough power so that the people who vote against it, they don't listen to their voices. Their vote doesn't count or whatever. You look at what's happened in California. It's impossible to get the Democrats out of California, because they have changed the election laws so much that you just can't vote them out. That's what they want to do to the rest of the country. I think the country's waking up. I just hope it's not too late.
It feels like that. As someone who lives in California, you think, how are we ever going to get our state back? And it's like, we can't let this happen to the country. We can't let these lies infiltrate us anymore. That's why it really is the most important election of our lifetime.
For example, just to put a button on that, the whole California law about the top two vote getters being on the ballot. Half the time you're voting between two communists. It's like, and you don't even have a choice.
Yep, it's exactly right. All right. So I want to ask you about Mike Pence, because Mike Pence, was he in on this? What his behavior after January 6th, so strange. And, he was such a loyal vice president, I think, to President Trump until this moment, and still continues to be pretty disloyal to Trump and to the MAGA movement, and really to what the truth is. So where do you see he plays into all of this? What's his story?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that much about Pence, but I do know that there are certain politicians in this country, quite a few of them, who are not people that operate on principle. They operate on, what's my best chance of staying in office? Like, they look at wherever they're from, they look at their constituents and do I have a better chance as a Republican or a Democrat? So, and they adopt whatever that is. And once you get into office, I think that really it all changes for them. And then whatever principles they had, they convinced themselves, I can only do good if I can stay in office. So I think somebody like Pence, he looks at the landscape and he just says, I think it's going to be better for me, for my position, to go against Trump and go against this MAGA movement. And I think that's a lot of the Republicans that you see, coming out for Harris, which is completely ridiculous. I mean, no sane person is going to really endorse somebody that brain dead. But, they really are trying to protect their position. And I don't know what that entails for Pence. I mean, he may be, I don't know what is causing him to do that, but I know it's not principle. I know that.
So I want to shift back to Hollywood, because Jen and I talk a lot about the really important role that Hollywood plays in shaping the culture. And you were friends with Andrew Breitbart. You know that this was just a major theme for him, right? That politics is downstream from culture. By the time things are being voted on Capitol Hill, they were decided years earlier in the culture. Wow. And probably nobody does a bigger job of shaping that than Hollywood. And on that note, I just have to mention, because I wanted to tell Jen about this, I started a new series last night with Don Johnson, of all people. I think it's called Dr. Odyssey. It's
Dr. Odyssey, yeah.
Right? Did you watch it?
Haven't watched it yet, but I've got it on my DVR. It's ready to go.
Okay. One thing that's really, so on this note, one thing that was really shocking about it to me is that it seems like a very benign, kind of innocent, almost goofy show, right? Like almost like a modern remake of Love Boat. But there is a narrative thread in it where this doctor was actually patient zero for his area in Massachusetts in the COVID crisis. And he was describing how deathly ill he became. And I really wonder, and the other thing that to me was such a red flag, he says to him, he says in the narrative of the show, he says, well, and then once I recovered, I realized what I want to focus on is joy. I mean, you want to tell me that this wasn't scripted by the Democrat Party?
Did he want to turn the page on what was behind him? Was that the next?
Exactly. Okay. So I'm just saying, flags up. Okay. So Nick, coming back to you, because I just find it extraordinary. Actually, you are such an amazing case because you have been such an outspoken and conservative. And I have to say, I think you've produced some of the most important conservative films of the last 5-10 years. And yet you're still going strong. I mean, I was just looking at what you've been doing lately. You're in the Reagan movie. You're in Vindicating Trump, which is in theaters now. And you're also in The Perfect Couple on Netflix. How do you survive? How do you do this? And is there hope for Hollywood?
I don't know why I keep getting work. I mean, maybe they don't pay attention to us or something, or they don't know, or I don't know. Maybe they don't care. I mean, the Netflix thing, I think the director really liked me and wanted me in the thing, and she's from Denmark. So maybe she just wasn't that invested in American politics. I don't know. I can't really explain all that. I've been very fortunate. I'm able to work for so long. I'm very grateful for that. As far as Hollywood goes, I think it's going to be replaced. I don't think there's any real hope for it. I think it's going to go away because just like what you're saying, what you were describing about the Don Johnson show, there's so many things like that you might watch one episode of it, and if you're not on the team, if you're not completely down with the leftist cabal about everything, you're going to go, I'm not going to waste my time with that. Mm-hmm. And more that's happening. And the old model of how television used to be viewed, it was based on ad revenue. And see, the point then was to get more and more people to watch your show. Well, now it's all based on a streaming model, which means everybody's just paying a subscription fee. And so they have been completely separated from that responsibility of trying to get more and more people to watch their show. So now all they do is impress each other with their politics, because in order to get your show on the air, you just have to impress the the leftists in the cubicle next to you in Disney, rather than, trying to get a bunch of people to see your show. So I think that's going to die away on the vine. You have groups like Angel Studios, Daily Wire, a lot of things springing up. The Reagan movie was made totally independently of Hollywood.
Yeah.
I think more and more you're going to see that, because there's an audience out there that's sick of that crap and doesn't like to be talked down to by their stars like Robert De Niro and all the other people that speak to half the country like they're animals. I think more and more people are going to turn away from that, and we're going to replace it with something decent.
And what's really encouraging, and the way that like average people or average conservatives can make a difference, is it used to be that there were 3 shows on 3 networks at the same time. And those are really your choices. Now you really have an opportunity where if something comes up and you see the red flags and you think, oh, I don't like this, you can move on to something else because there are so many choices. And Nick, I'm super excited because my co-host, Grant Stinchfield on The Morning Answer, told me how great A Perfect Couple is. And now that I know you're in it, that's even more reason to start it. So I can't wait for that.
It's a small part. That's a small part.
It's okay. I'm into it. I'm into it. All right. So how often do you get threatened? Because you're exposing a lot. Do you ever feel threatened, or has anybody? I mean, I can't imagine that the government loves that you're saying, "Hey, the FBI was involved on January 6th." Have you been okay? Is everything good?
I don't know why they haven't come after me. They've actually come after the director of the War on Truth. They've come after a lot of people that I know, and the FBI, when they came after my director, Chris Burgard. Mm-hmm. Most of the questions they asked him were about me. So I don't know. I don't know why they haven't come after me yet. I mean, I didn't do anything illegal on January 6th, but most of the people they've come after didn't either. So some people tell me that they think I'm just too big a star for the FBI to come after. I don't think that's it. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But the fact of the matter is, Jen, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It could happen any minute. And because they'll come after anybody that they think, if they think they can get an advantage by doing it, they'll do it. So it hasn't happened to me yet, but it's not like I don't think about it.
So I have to talk a little bit more about politics because my new job is I'm chair of the Fairfax County GOP. So I'm looking at things all the time. We've seen some really interesting stories come out about the steady shift of the Hispanic voter. I was just looking at a fascinating detailed map, actually precinct by precinct, of how donations to Harris are matching up to donations to Trump. So in my little tiny precinct here in Northern Virginia, Harris has about twice as many donations as Trump, which sounds like, ooh, that's bad news. But this is in an area where Trump only got 29% of the vote in 2020. So I think we are seeing significant shifts in all kind of places. I'm just curious for you. I know you're not living in Hollywood, but you're interacting with Hollywood. And for all the types of people that you interact with, how are you feeling about Trump's chances?
I think there's no question that if the election is legitimate, Trump wins by a mile. I mean, I really don't have any fear about that. The only fear I have is, are they going to be able to steal it again? Because I think they stole it the last time. So that's my only qualm. I do think that a realignment is taking place where you have the Democrat Party is now the party of the rich and the elite and the government jobs, and the Republican Party is now the working class party. You see what's happening with the Teamsters. Union people are waking up. In Hollywood for many, many years, I mean, since I've been an out conservative, the crew is almost predominantly conservative in film business. I mean, I had so many people coming up to me during Justified when I was doing that going, hey, man, love what you're doing. I wouldn't do it, but I love what you're doing. but there's a lot of people waking up out there. And like I said before, I just hope it's not too late. I hope the mechanism has not taken over so that it's impossible to get them out.
It's really interesting. I know you said you left Los Angeles, Nick, and I still am living here. But just to put, as you said, a pin on what you're saying, you drive through the San Fernando Valley, I'm seeing Trump flags flying from people's homes. Yesterday, I saw a truck drive by me with the Trump banner hanging off the back end. It's when you go to South Pasadena and Beverly Hills where you see a few Kamala Harris lawn signs. And there has been this shift. The well-to-do people seem to back her up, but the people who are living in and really having to deal with the policies that the left has doled out, those are the people who are ready for something different and who embrace President Trump. And look, I'm not saying California is going to turn red anytime soon because of the infrastructure they've put in here, but there is definitely a shift in people's understanding. And I think the fact, and your big piece of this, that people realize that we're being lied to every single day by the government we used to trust is really what's waking people up.
And I think it's really, too, if you don't have to worry how much a dozen eggs costs or how much a gallon of gas costs, you're probably going to vote for Harris. But if that bothers you, you're going to vote for Trump. And that's really the realignment right there.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to see the new film, The War on Truth, which I've not seen yet. Jen, have you seen it?
I haven't, but it's on my viewing list now. I know it came out in May. It's available right now. People can get it, and we want you to. Just go to the website, theworontruthmovie.com, theworontruthmovie.com. Nick Searcy, who's been with us all episode long, is the producer and the star, theworontruthmovie.com, and it's called The War on Truth. Nick, we are so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Give him a follow at Nick Searcy, and we want you to come back anytime and tell us about some of the other stories you're working on.
And you can also get my book on Amazon if you want. It's called Justify This.
Absolutely. Get the book as well. Nick, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you. And thank you all for joining us. We want you to get Katie's book, the
Next Gen Marxism.
The War on Truth. Next Gen Marxism. Too many titles floating around in my head right now. Next Gen Marxism, which is available wherever you get your books. You can get to her on her website, katiegorka.org. You can search for Catherine Gorka on Facebook, Gorka Katie on X, and you can find me on social media as well. Jennifer Horn Radio on Facebook and Instagram, and Jennifer Horn on Truth and on X. And thank you so much for those 5-star reviews and for sharing Happy Women with all of your friends. We appreciate you. This podcast is growing, and all of that support really helps us. So connect with us on all of our platforms. Just go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com and look for Happy Women. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Happy Women Podcast.